All right, everyone, let's kick this off. So, the subject of today's webinar is quite topical. It's also very important for the future of binary options. And we're going to be discussing today what happens if binary options are banned in key geographies, with a key focus on Israel, of course, which is the hotbed or hub of technological innovation in binary options, but also brokerage services. This webinar, of course, is recorded, and I am required by the law to read you this disclaimer, so please bear with me. The contents of this material are for informational purposes only and do not constitute investment advice. Blue Sky Binary assumes no responsibility for any potential errors, inaccuracies, or omissions in this material. Nothing in this communication contains or should be considered as containing an investment advice or an investment recommendation or a solicitation for the purpose of purchase or sale of any financial instrument. Binary options trading may not be suitable for all investors, as it carries a very high degree of risk to your capital. Trading such products is risky, and you may lose all of your investment. Past performance is not indicative of future results. Poor fill rates, expiry times, market volatility, and platform errors could result in losing trades. Before deciding to invest in binary options, you should carefully consider your investment objectives, level of experience, and risk appetite. You should be aware of all the risks associated with foreign exchange and binary options trading, and seek advice from an independent financial advisor if you have any doubts. The agenda is to give you a snapshot on what exactly is happening, how severe is the ban if it goes through, what does it actually mean for the binary options industry, and more importantly for you as a current or future trader of binary options, what exactly you should prepare for and what steps you could consider taking. And then at the end, we'll have a Q&A. So around 2 weeks ago, and we're in March 2016, entering April, around 2 to 3 weeks ago, a set of news articles by relatively reputable news sources, including the Times of Israel and Finance Magnets, which covers financial releases, products and services in this industry and also the FX industry, released some articles stating that binary options are likely to be banned in Israel by the Israeli Securities and Exchange Commission, or the ISA. Now, mind you, for those of you that are new, you would know that Israel is a major technological hub and also the area where a lot of binary options began, and also where a lot of binary option brokerages, both regulated and unregulated, operate currently. While no bans are in effect at present, if they go through, it would mean that binary option brokerages active in Israel, which represent over 50% of the market, would not be allowed to solicit deposits from local residents only. All right, so the actual technical implications of the ban from a market perspective are quite small because it's limited to local Israeli residents. However, in general, this is a crackdown on binary option brokerages that are following unethical depositor recruitment business models, and with official authorities behind it, like the ISA, who actually have proper enforcement powers legally. This move could reduce fraud in the binary options industry around the world considerably. Let's discuss how severe the ban exactly is. And to do this, I think we can go back to what happened in the US. So if the bans, similar to the ones the CFTC and the SEC issued in binary options in the US a few years ago, they actually had a positive effect as they created a consolidation or a net consolidation where a few regulated players today dominate the US binary options market. All right, and we see this with the CFTC, which regulates Nadex and Cantor Exchange. Nadex is owned by the British listed IG Group, and Cantor Exchange, which is owned by a very big equities and asset class trading firm called Cantor Fitzgerald. Now, the bans do not mean the bans that if they do come and when they do come in Israel on binary options, they do not mean that binary options as a trading class will be outlawed globally and cease to exist, right? It's far from that. Binary options are here to stay and are seeing increased adoption across the world as an easier to understand and go-to asset class than FX or equities. So they're competing directly with them in the eyes of the retail trader, right? Not in the eyes of the institutional proprietary uh, trader or the flow type of traders. This is actually it's kind of a go-to place for the retail trader, binary options. It's a great bridge into more complex asset classes. Global traded volumes in binary options today are roughly speaking 3 billion US a year, but at the current growth rates, they could reach 20 to 30 billion in just 5 years from now. Now, all of this means that the mix of binary option brokerages, if the bans do go through in Israel, will slowly change for the better, making the asset class a safer investment option longer term. All right. So, how will it actually change the industry? The bans are likely to mean that binary option brokerages that are following the old model will suffer market share loss or could suffer market share loss to those that are following the new model. And industry consolidation will occur where a few well regulated, highly ethical brokerages are likely to dominate the marketplace. This isn't something that's going to happen immediately after the bans happen. These things take a few months, maybe even a year or two. However, what's most likely going to happen is that you're going to get fewer players, but being larger and off size. All right. And let's discuss the two models. What is the old model and what is the new model? The old model, what we like to call the bleed them dry model, is befitting of the following 7 factors, give or take. There are a few more, but generally speaking, without naming names, what you get is an auto trader or an electronic service that lures you to deposit at a unregulated, most of the time an unregulated binary options broker. Over the course of a week or 2 weeks, or maybe sometimes a month if you're lucky, the auto traders' win rates are below the required win rate to remain profitable or break even. And gradually, what you witness is a depletion of your either virtual or real money in your account. And what happens after that is that an account manager that works for the binary options broker, who you're trading against, by the way, will ask you to redeposit. And they can be quite pushy. And this can result in you depositing more and getting excited or being promised a lot of returns. In certain instances, in very extreme cases, you will also get account managers that take total control of your account and they trade it for you. Also, sometimes in order to get you to deposit more, you are offered deposit bonuses. So if you deposit an X amount, let's say 5 or 10,000, you may get a bonus twice or 3 times that amount. However, what you don't know or what you don't read in the fine print is that that actually serves to lock in not only the bonus amount, but of course your original deposit as well. And a recent innovation, and by recent I mean maybe last 3 or 4 years, is risk-free trades, which are not genuinely risk-free most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time. Like bonuses, once you say yes and you take on the onus of having risk-free trades taken on your account either by the broker, the account manager, or yourself, it has a very similar lock-in effect that bonuses have. So if you lose your capital, yes, you get your capital replenished back in your account, but that's basically bonus money. So it's locking your equity. And then you're tied to very long uh, volume based periods that you have to work through the volume before you have a chance of withdrawing. And on that note, the withdrawal process at brokers that are following this bleed them dry model is very, very drawn out. Often you never get your money back, or you have to wait months and it's only sent to you in chunks, and it shouldn't be that way, right? So this is what is the old model. And the new model, which we call laissez-faire, which is an economic term, which basically means let the invisible hand work its way, is exactly the opposite of what you see in the old model. So what you're seeing here is there are no products or services that you are lured into by depositing and then they trade for you or anything like that, right? So there is no auto traders or anything like that. Once you do make the decision to deposit, how much ever it is, whether it's just a $10 or $50 deposit or if it's a $1,000 deposit, no account manager regulatorily is allowed to call you or does call you asking you to redeposit or deposit more, right? More importantly, account managers do not trade your account on behalf of you, and nor do they give you investment advice. There are no bonuses. In some rare instances, you will find highly ethical brokerages offering a segregated bonus which sits in a separate electronic account, and it's often a very small bonus. And in those instances, that still confines to the new model, right? The old model, the bonus literally secures your long term account depletion because your account is locked, your equity is locked or locked in. These new model brokerages do not offer bonuses, and if they do, they are simply segregated. Also, these brokerages that are following the new model do not offer risk-free trades. Okay, that doesn't mean that all highly ethical brokerages don't offer risk-free trades. If the risk-free trades are very small amounts, $25, $50, it's it's possibly acceptable, but if they are in perverse amounts, $500, $1,000, $5,000, then those are some possible red flags. And last but not least, and probably the most important point, is the hassle-free withdrawals. Right. So in the new model, the brokerages either have instant withdrawals, electronic transaction plugins, which automate the withdrawal process to your bank account or to your checking account or to your online account or e-wallet, or in some instances, you have a 1 to 3, maximum 4 to 5 day wait period if you are doing a bank-to-bank transfer, right? But generally speaking, what you'll see is that brokerages that are currently following the new model versus the old model are probably the ones that are going to survive these bans in the long run. Okay, so what does this actually mean for you? All you need to do is ask yourself if you are currently entrusting your funds in a broker that is following the old model or the new model, right? It's a simple set of checks that you need to take. All right, and that's it. That was short and sweet. I hope that add a bit of value to your trading. We're going to follow up, obviously, with a press release that goes into the phenomenon of the old model and the new model and what's happening in more depth. But this webinar was basically to give you an update. And now I'll take your questions. I see a question from Leighton Whiteley. So essentially, we are safer with binary.com. Leighton, binary.com is a broker that definitely follows the new model. We can go through these one by one. You can see that the broker doesn't offer directly from themselves products that trade for you. There are, of course, products created that do interface with binary.com, but they do not require activation only after a deposit. Okay. The account managers certainly do not call you. And by law, binary.com is MFSA regulated, which is the Maltesian or Malta-based financial regulator, which falls under the EU jurisdiction. Account managers are simply not allowed to give you investment advice or solicit your business or ask you to redeposit or what have you. Right? They have no bonuses in binary.com, no risk-free trades, and withdrawals are almost always instant or taking up to a few business days. I see a question from Ken Cadman. When are the regs possibly going to be introduced? Ken, it seems the pace of introduction is quite quick. The ISA of Israel seems very adamant to get this ban in place. So we can't give an exact date, but we would say possibly between 3 and 6 months from now, should it go through. Yes, German. A question from German. Is it possible that you disclosed a clear example of both old and new model brokers? For legal reasons, I cannot give examples of old model brokers, but what you can, of course, do is look at any broker that you've been with or that you're thinking about depositing at, and ask yourself these 7 questions, or run these 7 analyses um, before you do any deposits, and you'll pretty much have the answer even before you deposit, or if you have currently already deposited. With regards to the new model, generally speaking, not in all instances, but most instances, you'll see that BSB, Blue Sky Binary, generally works with the brokers following the new model. So option trade, which is SISEC regulated, which is a spot option broker, has been incident free for years now, literally years. The entire BSB community, or a big portion of it, has at some point dabbled there, deposited there, worked with them. So they are an example of a broker following the new model. ETX is an example of a broker following the new model. They use the Markets Pulse platform. The binary.com certainly is an example of a broker following the new model. So those are examples of brokerages, right? And again, this is not a product promotion. There is no affiliate link or anything. But since you asked, those would be real life examples. And the list is by no means exhaustive. But on the other hand, there are more and more brokerages that are adopting this new model. See a question from David Boyle. Will funds locked in by bonuses be released in the future? David, it's a catch-22. So if the broker is very large, and there are some very large regulated brokers by SISEC, without mentioning names, that offer these bonuses, if you meet the volume criteria, then you have a high chance of getting your withdrawal. The only problem is that, let's say you've deposited $20,000 and you have taken a bonus of double your deposit, so you're sitting at 40,000. Normally, your volume requirement could be 30 times up to 50 times, which means that you have to make a volume of anywhere from 600,000 to a million. And unless you engage in high frequency trading, and mind you, there is a inverse relationship between the more you trade and your win rate. The less you trade, you have a better chance of a higher win rate, right? It's as simple as that. So what the volume does is it makes you trade more because you want to get that, you want to release your funds. But the problem is you probably won't make it till that date. What normally happens is that you face account depletion, you martingale, and you bust your account. And that's why these lock-in bonuses are such a great tool from the perspective of those offering it, that it actually locks the client's funds. And the client never really lives to the day where they can put in the withdrawal request. But what I can say is that should you meet the volume requirements, unless it's a completely unscrupulous broker that literally has never any intention of returning your funds, generally speaking, they can be released. I see a question from Nicola Gortan. Where is binary.com in all of this? Is it safe? Nicola, yes, binary.com is safe. It literally meets categorically each of these 7 criteria. And certainly for now, again, we don't we're not owned by, or we don't have no sort of equity ownership, vice versa, in binary.com. So we don't know what the future holds for the next few years, but we can certainly say at this moment, binary.com certainly fits the new model. I see a question from Roy Brown. Are you able to provide a list of ethical brokers? Yes, Roy. So as mentioned at the end of the webinar, just before the Q&A began, we are going to do a proper press release where we will be giving certain names. I've already mentioned a few now, such as the ones we work with. What we won't do is, of course, give an exhaustive list of all the brokers, because there are always new good brokerages coming on stream that are following the new model. And as we learn more about them and work with them, they will also meet our sort of high quality benchmark. With regards to the brokerages of the old model, the list is pretty exhaustive, and it's not something that we're going to publicly release. But hopefully with the certain recommendations on the new model brokers, that should suffice. I see a question from Avraham Schwartz. Will this improve broker price manipulation on large trades? That's a great question. So the thing about brokerages, both unregulated, regulated, is that they will use an external price feed. Okay. And as a professional trader, both myself and our entire team, what we can tell you is that it's very rare either the bucket shop or a very regulated broker like binary.com will be using or will be manipulating the price feed, right? Normally, it just comes down to data packet errors, high bid-ask spreads in the source feed, price discrepancies in the source feed, actual general technical errors that may result in some wonky pricing. In certain instances, technology platforms that are deployed by certain binary brokers give the broker the ability to build in spread into um, the accounts of certain high win rate depositors. And so there is manipulation. I'm not saying it never happens, but it's a very rare event. Now, with regards to the bans in Israel, if they happen, the link is unclear if this will improve quote feed manipulation. But what I can say is that if you look around at the current brokers that are following the new model, you'll also generally see that it's very rare where you will see manipulation, both on small and large trades, right? The only thing to note is that we would never advise for you to take jumbo trades, regardless of the size of your account, in binary options, mainly because binary options is a good place to build up your capital, right? And I'm saying kind of maximum sort of $100,000 in that type of range. But once you reach that, we would advise to diversify and enter markets where you have a market maker, right? So what is still missing in this industry, this is a good step forward if it happens, the bans, but what is still missing, of course, is the presence of heavy regulation like the FCA regulating binary options in the UK. Um, and on top of that, market makers being able to price the instrument, which they don't do now, and of course, incorporate it in their balance sheet offering, and therefore also guys like Deutsche Bank and all the big FX market makers providing their market making services to binary option brokers. This is not to say this won't happen in the future, but it's not there now. And until that happens, we would always advise you to limit your trade sizes until that changes. Let's see a question from Shiraz Rustam. Any idea on the time frame for Israel to start the ban? So again, I would say between 3 and 6 months. We are trying to get in touch with the head of the ISA, who has been quite a proponent of the crackdown. And once we find out, we may be able to also get him to do a webinar or get him to do a Q&A so he can answer you directly. But I would say if the bans go through, again, it's not 100% certain, then it would be probably a 3 to 6 month process, but we need to see. So a question from Mike Trend. What could happen to an account if the broker is banned? So this was interesting. Again, this is without mentioning names, but if you have an account at a broker that is explicitly following the old model, what happens if they lose the ability to solicit local Israeli clients? All that means is that their ability to expand the business or garner more deposits from that specific geographical location is culled overnight. It's cut immediately, right? So that net means that they just have less money to pay out to people like you, and that could mean delays on withdrawals, and it could mean you not getting your money back. It doesn't mean that it means that, but all I'm trying to say is that net they have less money to solicit from other clients to pay you with. So it's on the margin, that's what it would mean. So a question from Marian Franin. What about honored paybacks from brokers? Is that old model? I mean, by good trading results, they give you extra money. That happens in binary.com. Marian, that's something I haven't come across. Maybe you could email us about that. That's something pretty new for me, honored paybacks. Or maybe you could rephrase the question. Maybe I've missed something there. Let's see a question from Uman Johnson. Is Signal Hive going to support other brokers apart from binary.com? If you mean Signal Hive hybrid, yes, for sure. We want to diversify it as well. We don't want to force or cluster everyone into one particular broker because that also increases our business risk. But this is something that is slow moving and it's something we're working on. See a question from Alex Lahome. What do you think will happen? A lot of clients will move to other brokers, safer one. Yeah, Alex. I mean, basically what we're doing is we're looking at what happened in the US. There is precedent for this, right? So there's no need for us to extrapolate and make scenarios and assumptions. Of course, it won't be exactly the same, but if you see what happened in the US, you had quite a few foreign brokerages soliciting US clients. That resulted in a lot of scandals that were made public in New York and other states as well. And then the CFTC cracked down. And remember, the CFTC has the ability to activate the police force, and including the FBI, which has foreign jurisdiction powers as well in Israel as well. And that's when the kind of the Great Gatsby was brought down. And what that resulted in is when the CFTC and SEC did this, there was a lull for about a year or so. But then you had some pretty um, commercial minded people over in the UK and IG Group. They saw the opportunity and they discussed with the CFTC, and they got Nadex started, which is the North American Derivatives Exchange. That's just a binary options broker that does digital options, not too dissimilar from what you see here in Europe. Slightly um, different payouts and different entries, but it's in binary options. And what happened there is that that company then sapped up a lot of the regulated retail supply of depositors, right? So, and since it's the only one, along with Cantor Exchange, which is relatively new at the time of this webinar, um, you have these kind of two big guys, and they're kind of satiating that market appetite. There are, of course, U.S. clients or North American clients that do not wish to be under the umbrella of these regulated brokerages, and so they still, despite the advice of the U.S. authorities, seek to trade abroad. And there are brokerages, a few, a handful, maybe five or so, that will accept American clients, right? And they offer them all sorts of deposit bonuses and all those cherry on the top, so to put it. And you get more exotic trading options that you may not, for example, have in Nadex or what have you. But what we've seen in the US is consolidation, right? So big players that are taking up the market, although Nadex probably isn't that big. But in Europe and Asia, if this starts to proliferate, these bans in key regions, then what will happen is that those that are currently relatively big players, for example, Binary.com being one player, the Maltesian Financial Services Authority, which is very prominent in Europe. There's a lot of hedge fund activity there, regulated hedge fund activity. They work under the MiFID guidelines as well. So what's happening with Malta is they have no plans, right, to deregulate or ban binary options. So what will happen is if you have a broker operating in Malta who's allowed to solicit European clients, and then you're having a gradual shutdown of other regulatory regimes, let's say Israel, it's but natural that that single broker will people will gravitate to them, right? But it's not only binary.com. It's it's SISEC will continue to regulate binary options, and that probably increase because it employs thousands of people in Cyprus alone. The industry, it's good for the economy, and what will happen is that you'll get few brokerages. We can't tell you which those brokerages will be specifically, but you can pretty much guess. If you've been with BSB for a while, you can start to see what it will be. And then what will happen, and this is quite interesting, this is maybe 3 years out, is consolidation between those three players, right? So we're talking acquisitions. And that's really interesting because the more you acquire, the more let's say one broker acquires the other, you get a bigger balance sheet, right? And the concept of, if you want to call it or not, a shared liquidity pool, although that's not the right term, strictly speaking, it is a pseudo market then, right? So if, for example, you get a merger between X and Y, which had 15,000 depositors and 30,000 depositors, suddenly you have 45,000 depositors, and you get some agglomeration effects, which means suddenly you have a mini market maker there, right? And then you're not really trading against the balance sheet of the broker because they're better able to match your trades. And that's so important. So this first phase will result in consolidation, and then you'll get even more consolidation. And you may even get reverse, vertical integration. Gaming companies, large betting companies may actually buy large binary option brokerages. And that's actually not a bad thing because those are heavily regulated, and that'll probably help with the sector. Yeah, Maureen, with regards to honoring payouts, they definitely honor payouts. There's never been a incident that we have come across. There's always one or two stories that kind of circulate around the web. There was one earlier this year with Binary.com. We obviously brought it to the management's attention, and we immediately that there was a response that there was some manipulation, and indeed it turns out there was some significant manipulation of the binary.com price feed that resulted in this particular person being able to grow their account from $50 to $20,000 in 3-4 months, which anyways is impossible, so or almost impossible without some sort of manipulation. See a question from John Walker. So in the context of Blue Sky Binary, no need to worry to be concerned. No, not at all, John. This is a cleaning up of the space. So this is actually really a good thing for the sector, and it happened in the U.S. And it resulted in just a few big players, and kind of on the microcosmic level, this is probably what's going to happen in Europe and even Asia. So yeah, this is definitely a right step forward and a good thing. Good question, Alex. You say ETX Capital called you twice. Does that mean that they work with the old model? It depends what they asked you when they called you twice. We know the ETX team very well. We meet them probably on a monthly or bi-monthly basis here in their London offices. They are heavily regulated by the FCA, so the above anything they value their license. And foreign exchange is their big business. Binary is a small wing. So you need to tell us obviously what they said, but I would be surprised if they asked you to deposit with an auto trader. So a question from German de la Vega. I only had weird issues with binary.com, platform freezing sometimes, and most important, they suddenly modify the profit, which is uncommonly high, and adjust it to normal payouts. Okay, that's a good question. So with regards to the platform freezing, German, I wouldn't know about that because I don't trade on binary.com on my private account. However, what I would say with regards to the dynamic payouts is binary.com is one of the brokers that uses the Black-Scholes option pricing model to give dynamic payouts depending on what's happening to the price. They look at implied volatility, price action, and the time remaining to expiry. And based on that, they will price the payout. So what you'll sometimes see is if there's a big move of the price down, your gut instinct will tell you that the price is going to shoot up, right? And that's what most traders feel, and that's why you get a mean reversion effect, slight mean reversion, right? And binary.com knows that. They know that, so if they believe that the probability of a reversal is high, they're going to reduce the payout, right? And that's how real call and put options are priced as well, right? Unlike other binary option brokers where it's always fixed, right? Depending on time of day, roughly speaking, it varies between 75 and 82, but it doesn't really move intra-hour. With binary.com, it's on the fly, right? But that isn't manipulation. That's actually how options are mathematically priced. The flip side of this, of course, as you know, with binary.com is, and I hate mentioning binary.com so much on this webinar as if we're sponsored by them, which we're absolutely not, is that you can get very high payouts as well, over 100% in certain instances, when binary.com's option pricing model believes that there's no chance you're going to win this trade, but of course the price continues further in that direction. And if you do win it, they give you 100, 110% or whatever. So it's kind of a mix and match. See a question from Rahul Tautoy. Which brokers are good options for US traders? Raul, so the purpose of this webinar, I can't actually give deposit advice on where to deposit, but you can definitely join Blue Sky Binary or speak to the community in Signal Hive and just kind of find out from the community which are the ones. There are quite a few names that go around, but I wouldn't be able to tell you that on the webinar here. All right, I see a question from John Walker. So will all the brokers be banned or only the old model types? No, so the bans are on the binary options as an asset class by the ISA. However, it's worth noting, and this is stated in the Times of Israel article, that they are regulating the asset class at the same time. In the last year and a half, they have given the option to binary option brokerages that believe they meet the regulatory requirements. And by the way, the standards are pretty strict in Israel of the ISA. So there have been around, I think, 20 to 30 applications that were sent by binary option brokerages. But what we understand based on the article is that under four have been approved. So to be clear, um, it's the bulk will basically not be allowed to solicit business locally, right? Because they weren't able to get um, regulation. And what's probably going to happen, therefore, is that the ones that are following the new model, especially the ones that are regulated, they are obviously allowed to conduct business uh, their current way. It's a good question from Avraham. Who regulates the technology providers? So we can take, for example, um, the spot option provider. Spot option has, roughly speaking, 60%, maybe 65% market share, and they are regulated now by Spot Capital Markets, which has the regulatory license for investment advice and dealing. They are regulated by SISEC. With Tech Financials, I wouldn't know on the top of my head, but Tech Financials had a IPO last year, both for their own brokerage brand, which is Option Fair, if I recall correctly, and Tech Financial itself, the platform. They actually IPO'd in London last year. It was on the AIM, I believe, or one of the tech exchanges. And so in order to actually IPO, you need to be regulated. So Tech Financials is, in my understanding. With regards to the other brokerages, they're unregulated. The other technology providers, unless I've missed some. It's a good question, Alex. You're asking obviously if SciSec have, they've regulated certain questionable brands. Can we trust SciSec as an institutional regulator? So the answer is 3 years ago, less so. 2 years ago, slightly less so. Today, a bit more because SciSec themselves, I think SciSec gets a bad rep, to be honest, because of a few um, kind of bad wolves amongst the pack, right? But it's worth noting that SciSec also has some very, very diligent and highly ethical spot option brokerages, might I add, that are under its belt. And SciSec is doing a good job of regulating them. Now, obviously, what this means, because in the event Israel does follow suit and issue the bans, it will just wake up SciSec more. Because for SciSec, don't forget, this is especially after what happened economically in Cyprus because of the EU bailout and the austerity measures. Cyprus took a big hit, and their government had to find different lines of revenue. Hence, SciSec. I'm not saying SciSec was born then, but SciSec really came into the fore 3-4 years ago and started handing out these licenses for which they get paid, right? And even when SciSec finds a broker, that's revenue collected for the government coffers, right, to help pay the Cypriot debt. So all of this links and interconnects. So at that point, it was more a revenue generation operation and light touch regulation. But now, as things are moving forward, and we've witnessed this firsthand, as we ourselves are looking to get regulated, believe it or not, both our education side and especially the Signal Life side. Although for us it'll be a long and drawn out process. What we've seen is that there are certainly some serious players in SciSec, and I think the spotlight will be on them in the coming months and year to really batten down the hatches and start to ensure that a lot of their brokerages that have the licenses already switch to the new model, and certainly the new ones, the new brokerages that they're handing out the license to, definitely better comply with the new model, right? And so the answer to your question is at this moment, you can trust SciSec as a regulator as long as the broker is following the new model, right? And there will be a day where SciSec will be more hard-handed, such that just having a license will be enough for you to assume that the underlying brokerage that carries the license follows the new model. But we're not there yet, okay? And I'm very happy to mention it, Option Trade, for those of you that have traded with them. I've traded with them. I have literally nothing negative to say about them. I mean, for me, it's a world-class service. And we have no CPA arrangement with Option Trade, right? None at all. So It's just an honest assessment that they are following the letter of the Cypriot regulator to the T, right? And it's not just them; it's some other brokers we work with as well. So it's really on a case by case basis. And I think at this point I should also mention, by the way, that what if you're at an unregulated broker, right? Um, does that make your funds less safe? Yes, of course, on the margin it does, but you have to also note that there are unregulated brokerages that may be following the new model. They may actually be in the process of obtaining regulation, right? Now, I know that a lot of brokerages say we're in the process of obtaining regulation, but there are genuinely some that as a management have a financial engineering background that don't have a gaming or gambling background or affiliate marketing background, and they are they're following the new model to the T. So it's important to not kind of throw the baby out in that respect. Okay. Okay, Alex, thanks for identifying. So you're thanks for clarifying. So you're saying the ETX person called you up and started talking about us, about Blue Sky Binary. That's good to know. That's really nice. We're flattered. I see a question from Rogerio Vitale. What will be the top three major binary options brokers within 5 years in your view? This is a great question, Rogerio. In my personal opinion, my personal assessment, not that of Blue Sky Binaries or Signal Hives, I believe binary.com and will definitely be up there, mainly because of the technological angle. What we have seen there is really kind of at the forefront of innovation in binary, certainly, maybe not in FX, but and so I think it's becoming an increasingly technological marketplace. So they will be up there. Um, I would not know the two and three, to be honest. That's you need to ask me the question another year because I need to see the impact of these bands. Once the consolidation process begins, I will be able to see where the flow of suppliers um, is gravitating to, right? I'm inclined to say, okay, someone like ETX would mop it up or option trade, but they're both owned by FX companies whose focus is FX. Option trade is owned by Hot Forex, and ETX binary is owned by ETX Capital, and they are um, focused on FX as well, right? So at this moment, the answer would be we need to find a binary options broker that follows the new model, that is regulated, and that is uh, big, right? Or that is quite big and that could be much bigger as a result of this. And that may be your answer. So, a question from Avraham Schwartz: why don't you see the possibility that binary options will just collapse? Well, I can tell you, Avraham, it's twofold. Firstly, it's speaking from the perspective of a kind of institutional former institutional researcher and trader. Um, it's a very attractive asset class if you understand what you're doing. If you understand the science behind it, you understand the markets, the risk return, the amount of money you can earn, the ability to take a small account, a $500, $1,000 account, into the multiples of thousands is unprecedented. You can't do that in equities unless you get in on a penny stock and you get lucky, or you get in on some crazy Facebook IPO at a big discount to net asset value or whatever. You don't get that. So the risk adjusted return for someone who knows what they're doing is so high in binary options it pales FX. I'll be very blunt, and equities. Um, again, if there are some event-driven situations, then in other asset classes like Greek debt, you could have bought it on a few cents on the dollar and made a big gain. But that's not traditional retail stuff. From the retail trader's perspective, which is what I am, I can tell you that once I went to binary options, I never really looked back. Although I trade FX and we engineer for FX, it's a really awesome asset class. The payouts are awesome, right? It's so simple. The simplicity of it is what makes it so beautiful. The the sadness is the fact that it's been run amok to a certain degree by certain bucket shops, and it's given a bad name. But this was the same with FX in the 90s, right? And then you had the big guns coming in like Oanda, which, by the way, I draw parallels between Oanda, which was run by Olson, who's a technological genius. Oanda today is a market maker. They have probably a balance sheet of north of $1 billion, and they They are, they're a big retail FX player, but in 2002 when they started, 2001, look at their technology. They were always ahead on the technological front. And it's similar to, brokers like binary.com. Obviously not binary.com is not the only one, but I see parallels here. And I see where Oanda has come in the last 10 years, and I see where certain brokerages will be. The asset class is so attractive. Um, and now this is coming from a professional trader, but if we go to from the perspective of someone that's very new, someone who just wants to generate income from home, look at the BSB Trader University course, right? If you really apply yourself, in 3 months you can trade and you can get your win rate to a respectable level that you can start to generate a bit of income. You can't do that in FX. You certainly can't do that in equities, right? Long term, um, because binary options you just need a basic technical skill set, a bit of discipline, and uh, you can grow your account, right? And so it's a great bridge from those that don't have any financial background into trading, right? And then from binary options, you can expand your horizons, and that's why I believe it's such an integral part of the total financial economy, long run. So I don't see it collapsing. I just see a lot of consolidation happening, to be frank. And if the asset class was broken, inherently broken, then of course there's a problem. But there is no breakage. I mean, mathematically, it's a it's a it's a good fungible asset. It's a question from Stepan Kalinic. Are software regulators ensuring that brokers do not have backdoor for manually adjusting prices? So at this moment, there are no software regulators, strictly speaking. You have the general regulators, like SISEC, for example, that offers investment advice, umbrellas, and licenses to option platforms, trading platforms, that then distribute it to their tied agents and their brands, right? So what I mean by that is that there's no specific software regulator per se in binary options. So it'll be quite generic. And at this moment, I don't believe that they have a clause or anything like that um, which allows them to audit if binary option technology platforms are actually adjusting prices or not. But is that something that'll happen in the future? Probably. I think it'll probably happen because you have it in the SEC, right? You certainly have that in more regulated investment sectors like equities. Price manipulation is a big no-no by the SEC. It's regularly investigated also by the FCA. You see this with the LIBOR scandals, the London Interbank Operating Rate, which basically is one of the most important rates for pricing most derivatives around the world. The LIBOR was apparently fixed or rigged by 5 or 6 big investment banks. It was a big scandal that broke a few years ago. Barclays was implicated in it as well. So it's happened at that level, right? But now it's been caught and it's being fixed. So I think with binary options, it's far too early, but it will happen in the future. So a question from Mark Wigler. I checked in late. Do you have a recording of the webinar? Yeah, we do. So a question from Alexander Lahom. So ICA sent an alert to SISEC indirectly. Yeah, it's an indirect spotlight, right? Like, look, hey, we're cracking down. What are you doing? And the answer is not to ban binary options as well. That just hits the Cypriot economy in a big way, and there's no reason to, because there are examples of brokerages that are abiding by the SISEC regulation to the T, and they're doing a good job. So the answer is to promote that, right? To actually promote that and only give licenses out to the really serious people. Any further questions from anyone? Okay, I see a question from Alexander Lahom. Is it safer to trade manually, even with Signal Hive, or can we totally trust that binary.com API is not tweaked from time to time? So the fact of the matter is that the binary.com API has undergone 3 iterative developments in the last, I think, 4 years, and now it's in its 4th iteration. And with it, we need to obviously develop as well, right, to make sure we remain compatible. And uh, my personal opinion, it's always safe to trade manually or semi-automatically, right? Um, Auto trading is for the people that just need a side income or don't have time. If you have the time, why would you auto trade? But if you don't have the time, you need to accept that there could be um, technical glitches in the software that can result in non-replicated trades. But with regards to binary.com tweaking the API from time to time, the problem if they do that is ultimately what it results in is just really bad entry prices, right? For the actual replicated entries. And if they start doing this, our system picks it up, right? Because we check the replicated price versus the actual market price at the time. That's part of our quality control that we run on the data. And if the deviation is too high and we start to see an increase in the deviation, right? There's always a deviation, but there's an acceptable range. And if there's an increase in that band, then we know that there's some problem, right? But we're always monitoring that. And if that happens, if we see an increase, let's say for a period of a month on certain trades, which historically have a high win rate, that's data we have that we can go to the Maltesian financial regulator and say, hey, listen, we have a big problem here. And from the perspective of a binary.com, speaking completely openly, they would not want to sacrifice almost 15 years of business development, and a big brand, especially in Asia, just for to get a bit of money out of a few Signal Hive depositors. So I don't. It's not that they can't do it. Of course, they can tweak the API, but I don't think they would. See a question from Avraham Schwartz. Can you give us a timeline? What would you like me to give you a timeline on, Avraham? Sure, Alex. Please rephrase your question then. I would say, Avraham, the bans, if they go through, and the consolidation, the first stage consolidation, will happen this year, probably. So over the next 2-3 quarters. And as these few players that are around following the new model and new binary option brokerages that set up shop, that take some share, that are operating the new model, then you're going to get the second stage of consolidation at some point in the industry. And the second stage of consolidation will be between these brokerages, probably happening in 2017, 2018. And then the third stage of consolidation is reverse integration with the bigger financial groups, right? Like IG Group owns Nadex. You may get some big financial groups buying into large binary option trading entities, and that's probably kind of end of this decade. So it's a 5 year sort of needle. Okay, Alex. Any further questions from anybody? I see a question from Bilal Bowman. Can you give us the names of the 3 to 4 brokers that the ISA have attacked? So I can't do that for legal reasons, but you can definitely write to the ISA. They are responsive. Their emails is there on their website, and you can get in touch with them. And the articles that the Times of Israel released, where the ISA director has been quoted, you can get in touch. You can get those from our registration link. Thanks, Avraham. Yes, Avraham, you're the best. Avraham wanted me to say that he's the best. Any last call for questions? Any questions? I see a few hands up. For those of you that have your hands up, I would have to unmute you, so you need to have a mic. Is it okay if you just ask the question via the text? Good. Okay. Thank you all for making this webinar, and I'll see you all shortly.